Hello, and welcome to The Prodigal Life, where we help make the connection between your faith and your everyday lived experience. I'm Deacon Harold, and joined by Ellen and Nick.
Here we are.
What are we going to talk about today?
We're going to tackle piety and simplicity.
Okay.
Which aren't like normal topics. It's not like something that everybody goes and talks about. They don't. I mean, to be honest with you, I didn't even know what piety meant until recently. So, and then the simplicity, I guess you could also say it's kind of a humility thing, but simplicity is a different word than humility. Wouldn't you agree, Deacon?
Yeah. So, humility means not thinking less of yourself, thinking of yourself less would be humility. Whereas piety is like reverence and devotion. It's particularly applied to liturgical practices. If you look at the church's documents or the catechism, it refers to piety primarily in the practices of the things of the faith, mostly the liturgical practice, and how practically things are lived out in the faith, and the devotion that we have toward those practices, which are designed to bring us into deeper union and intimacy with God. Right, so that's the positive connotation of piety. There's also a negative connotation where it's kind of like you're faking it, kind of a thing. You're just going through the motions without really having your heart. You're saying a bunch of words, so it's pretending to be pious, but it's not really. Your heart is not into it. So, and I think this is an important topic. Especially when it comes to, I mean, we're going to talk about a broad variety of things, but I think in liturgical practice, we can't get to the point where we're just going through the motions. Like, oh, I've heard this a million times. I've been going to Mass for 50,000 years, and I've heard that. I mean, we really have to make sure that our hearts and minds and souls are engaged fully at the Mass. And I think part of the piety is understanding why we do the things that we do at Mass.
I also like thinking of it in terms of, like, there is a relationship between the words, because I find in practice that piety can be most authentically expressed when we have true humility, right? So I am pious because I acknowledge that God is God and I am not. And so to me, that is kind of that interplay right there. And true humility is not, like Deacon said, it's not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And another way that I've heard humility defined is that you have an authentic and accurate understanding of the way that things are, understanding that things are what they truly are. And so that's another reason that phrase that you shared, Deacon, about humility is so important, because we ought not to think less of ourselves, because we are actually freaking amazing. Like, we are incredible beings. God made us so, but we can get caught up in that in a negative way.
The ego, the superego.
Exactly. And so, authentic humility is acknowledging, like, God, this infinite and incredible being that always was and is and always will be, who is outside of time and space. He created us to be in relationship with us. And that says something about what we are. And it says something about what our ultimate destiny is, because the way he created us is not what we are right now. What we are right now is a product of the fall of man, a product of original sin. We are broken, we're damaged. He didn't create us broken and damaged. We brought that on ourselves. But our ultimate destiny is to circle back to that full, communion, profound, even in many ways, what is considered to be a deeper union with God than we would have had at the beginning, before the fall, which is why we hear, the church say at the Easter Vigil, "O necessary sin of Adam that brought to us so great a Redeemer." Like, if it were not for the fall and for the redemption, we wouldn't get to have this. And so acknowledging all of that is humility in its right place, right? Like, we are incredible. We're meant for relationship with God. That's a big deal, but that doesn't mean I'm all that, Yeah.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, humility and I guess simplicity and humility, I think they kind of go hand in hand. I see them a little bit differently, and like piety is, like I said, it was just something I learned about, and it's one of the reasons, like I said earlier, is why I veil. You know what I mean? I do veil at every Mass. There's just something about, protecting the treasure that God, and making sure that it isn't about me. I'm not there to be you're not there to be the center of attention. I know when I go to Mass, I don't always have to sit in the front pew. I don't always have to do, you know what I mean? And, the look at me type thing. There was a time in my life, though, where that was very important. So, it's kind of a weird thing to look at. And with regard to the piety, I don't really know. Like I said, I didn't really have a good understanding, and I understand the devotion, and you're supposed to have that. But like in my journey, it's like I knew, but I took for granted what it was. Like, I knew God was God. I knew He was in the Eucharist. I knew Mary was, the Mother of God. We knew those things. I didn't really ever doubt those things. But I don't know that I ever really fully accepted them and really tried to marry myself and connect my heart, mind, and soul and spirit with that knowledge. So, like, I can remember going to Mass, and I wrote about this in an article that I wrote too, and I can remember going to Mass and, oftentimes just not even really being present for the Mass, not really paying attention to the Mass, not understanding exactly what was happening on the altar. I wasn't really catechized well at all. So I didn't know that, I guess I just always assumed that it was the body of Christ. I didn't think it had to become the body of Christ. So it wasn't that it wasn't intentional being not pious. It wasn't that. It was like strictly an ignorance. But I take responsibility as I got older for the ignorance, because you can only rest in your ignorance and claim that as a defense for so long, when ultimately becomes that you're just not looking. You're not trying to seek, that deeper, more reverent experience with Christ.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And there's other pious devotions of practice like the rosary and chaplet and those other kinds of things as well. Habakkuk chapter 6, verse 6 says, I want a loving heart more than sacrifice, knowledge of my ways more than holocaust. So the sacrifices that we make, as in the priesthood of all believers, right? Because the main job of priests to offer sacrifice. We make a sacrifice and offering of ourselves, of our lives to the Lord. And I think these pious practices and devotions help us to enter more deeply into that relationship, help us to enter more deeply into the mystery. So we just can't put them off. I think one of the mistakes that was made in misinterpreting Vatican II was they said we got rid of all those pious practices. Which is not true. Yeah. But a lot of that happened, sadly. And blaming Vatican II, but if you read the actual documents and what it says,
it's beautiful.
They weren't supposed to remove the Latin and all the other stuff. That
it didn't
was never
say that.
part
It said
of the
Latin's
deal.
supposed to, and Gregorian chant supposed to retain pride of place. What happened to that? And I think people lost the understanding of why we do the things that we do, and they lost some of that piety. In the sense that we're all the family of Christ, we're all the,
and the way people go to, and that, and the way people show up at Mass. Flip flops and T-shirts. We talked about it in the modesty issue, but it's relative in the piety issue as well, because and it, like you said, Nick, if you can't afford to bring, or you can't wear, or let's say it's last minute, or there's the only thing you can show up in, is a pair of jeans that are torn and a T-shirt. God still wants you there. Isn't it? You're not, unfortunately you are welcome, come in whatever clothing you have. But if it's an intentional thing, and like you plan for this, and every Sunday morning you're going to get up and you're going to dress your family and you're going to go to Mass, or Saturday night, or whatever that looks like, it should be an intentional piety. Like you want to reverence the Lord and where you're going and what you're going to, because you're literally going to where heaven comes to earth.
Yeah.
Every single time there's a Mass in the world, heaven is coming to earth.
And to be honest with you, increasing piety within my household, my family, has been transformative for. So we recently, I am not an anti Novus Ordo guy. Like I'll still go to a regular English Mass, and and I still encounter Jesus there. But I also have just really grown to love the traditional Latin Mass as of pretty recently, as of like January of this year or something like that.
Nice.
And in that time, when we were preparing our kids for what was going to happen, we talked about, it was really providing them with a heightened sense of piety. And they loved the idea that, like, man, this is kind of my hang up about Christmas too. Like if your kids are listening and they believe in Santa Claus, turn this off or mute it, or wear headphones. But my hang up with Christmas is like, gosh, the most incredible thing that ever happened in the human race up to that point. God became flesh, and then after roughly 9 months, whatever it was, he's birthed, and he takes his first breaths of this air that he created, and he did all of this for 33 years later, for the sake that he would die on the cross for us and become the Paschal Lamb, and all of this, and this. There's so much magic and mystery in what Christmas is actually about. And sure, you can still do the Jesus thing with Santa Claus, but it's also a distraction. It's a distraction from focusing and really swimming in the mystery and magic of Christmas.
And the gift
and
of
so,
Christmas.
yeah, and so we, there's actually a funny story about that. A long time ago, my wife and I decided when we got married, whenever we have kids, we're never going to lie to them about anything. And so that took Santa Claus right off the table. That took Easter Bunny right off the table. And we've done pretty dang well with that, especially me, not lying to the kids. And so basically they've grown up knowing to respect that other kids do believe in Santa Claus, to not be jerks about it. And this one year, it was Christmas Eve, and my kids were being super rambunctious, not going to sleep. And they're up in their room after we'd put them to bed, acting crazy, excited, whatever. So I poked my head in. And I'm like, if you don't lay down and go to sleep, Santa's not going to give you any presents. And my daughter, who had been facing the other direction, she turns, like in a creepy horror movie, she just turns her head. She had frozen when I opened the door, and she says, Santa's dead. Because she knew that Santa Claus is, St. Nicholas and all that stuff. It was incredible. But anyways, I just think that when we help to illustrate and teach the kids about the incredible significance of what's happening in the Mass, which we had the opportunity to reteach in the context of bringing them to the traditional Latin Mass, that changes everything. They get so excited now to look super beautiful in dresses and stuff for Mass. They get so excited to wear their veils. I went shopping with my son Augustine to get him some nicer clothes. They don't make suits for kids his age. It's impossible. Yep. It's infuriating. That's an aside. Anyways,
they used to.
Yeah, but maybe that also speaks to the fact that we are just in this culture that doesn't care about
a little less pious.
A little less pious, yeah. So, anyways, it's been a really cool thing to bring piety into a heightened place in our family.
Yeah,
Did you do that in yours?
Yeah, my mom definitely made sure that we. Were dressed for Mass, especially when I wasn't serving. If you're serving, she didn't really care much because you wore the alb and stuff, so it was no big deal. But if you weren't, we had to wear our shoes, and definitely. Even when I was in the choir, because I played guitar and sang in a choir on the weekends that I wasn't serving, and so even then, even though everybody else wasn't dressed, I was still dressed because that was very important. And I think that's a good thing, because what you wear on the outside speaks to a deeper reality. Like when you see a police officer or a fireman or a physician, right? That outward garb speaks to a deeper, richer inner reality. And I think the same thing when you dress a certain way to Mass, that says something, about your mindset and where you are, but sometimes we don't think about that. I think we just reduce it to, well, just be happy I'm even here. What? I mean, if let's just say you're going to go to the White House, you ain't going to dress like that to the White House,
right?
And that's just to meet some earthly ruler. What are we going to meet the King of the universe?
Right.
Dressed, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So
that's how it was presented to you. I mean, we always dressed for Mass. I mean, there were the occasional where we were coming off a sports team on a Saturday night or whatever, and we would have to go, but that was very rare. I mean, Sunday morning it was family day. It was always family day. Like, we really weren't allowed to do outside activities on Sundays. That was like a no. Every once in a while we may have a sleepover or something, but the child would usually get picked up in the morning before we would go to Mass, and then we'd spend the entire day together as a family, which usually meant doing chores and helping around the house and doing things like that. But it was always focused on family, eating our meals together and doing everything. But we would always dress for Mass. I mean, I can remember this picture from when I was little. We had these big bonnets with all the bows on them, you know what I mean? And the big bow tied under my chin. I probably was 5, you know, because for Easter, I mean, Easter was like, my mom was decked to the nines on Easter and Christmas. I mean, like, it was always about that. It was about showing up. You know what I mean? And showing up saying, yeah, I respect you. I know that you are the King of the world. I know that you are the God that breathed life into me. Yeah. So show up. You know what I mean?
Awesome.
Show up, dress up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And along those lines, maybe the White House is a bit of an unrelatable thing because most of us won't ever be invited to the White House. But like even if you're going on a first date with someone,
Oh, yeah.
you know, does this person matter enough to you to impress them to show that you put enough attention into this to look reasonably decent? You know, like, you're not going to show up looking like a scrub. Like, you're going to do your hair, you're going to do yourself up, wear your nicest jacket, your nicest jeans, whatever it is. You're going to look good. Well, what are we saying when we don't care nearly as much about showing up to Mass and presenting ourselves as well as we can for that? You know, God loves us no matter what. That's not the point.
Oh, yeah. And like we said, and if the only thing you have is that's all you have that you can wear, and that's the only thing you go to church.
Yeah.
Just go. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, and hopefully people will be accepting and not judge, because we're not supposed to judge. You know what I mean? Because we haven't walked in that person's shoes,
Yeah.
which is also a pious thing to do. You know what I mean? Is to reverence that they're a human being just like you, and they may not have what you have. So you just have to be reverent and,
And-
respect that person.
And I think when you said, because we're talking about piety and simplicity.
Simplicity.
You know, and that's actually one of the things I miss about monastic life. It's simplicity. Yeah, the bell rang in the morning. And what am I gonna wear today? I mean, like, you know, like when I was going speaking, I got a tie, got a shirt, got a suit, got shoes. You get up, you throw a habit on, you go down to adoration, you know, then the bell rings to start choir, and you don't have to worry about what you're gonna eat. You have to worry about what you're gonna do that day. I mean, it's just the beauty in the simplicity. That's, you know, but life with, you know, you're in the throes of this right now, and the kids, and you know, your wife's about to have another baby, and just, as you're in the midst of it, and life is complicated.
Right. But how do you keep it simple? Like, what do you do to try and simplify it? I mean, because we're like in the world, but we're not supposed to be of the world.
Yeah.
We did a show on that too, but that's the simplicity. And how does that relate to your piety in your life, whether it be your piety in your religious life or even the piety like you were talking about in your family life? How do you find that balance? How do you find simplicity in yours? I mean, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there listening to this and watching this that are like, my life is not simple, like ever. I mean, my life's not simple, but you know, how do you find it?
Well, for one thing, it's a choice.
True.
Right? So it's not out of your control. It might feel like it's out of your control, but if you really stop and think about it, it is a choice. You know, like, gosh, I think about a lot of my people that are super close to me that I care dearly about in South Florida, because that's where most of my family is. The life in South Florida is just a big hustle. Like, you are hustling between fighting traffic, you know, one of the hardest things down there is there's this really intense pressure, and it's not unique to South Florida, but there is a cultural thing there that there's a lot of pressure to have a huge, beautiful house. And people in South Florida are expected to buy a house that is outside of their means as a social standard. And what does that introduce? It introduces tension in the marriage. Both people have to work. The husband and the wife have to work. And what does that do to the kids? The kids, even if they're sending them to Catholic school, it means that they're getting taken care of through the extended day program or by a sitter or a nanny or something until the parents get home from work. Parents get home from work, they maybe are sitting together around a table for an hour for dinner, and then right to bedtime, and then the whole thing starts again the next day, all for this, you know, perceived life of luxury. It's a choice. You don't have to do that, you know? And so for us, like, right now, we're really working on that. And so we're actually in the middle of overhauling a lot of things. We're moving Awaken Catholic, which is, you know, where this show is produced. We're moving Awaken Catholic out of our house because for years now, it's been just this door that is constantly opening and closing, people coming in and out, whether it's the hosts of the different shows or the guests or whatever. And it has been chaotic. And on top of that, I've always also been doing production work on the side to put food on the table for the family. And so we're trying to eliminate that. And it's just a lot of stuff. So we're moving Awaken out. We're simplifying my work life. We're trying to figure out how God was going to, come in and all this. But we realized we have to make a choice. And that's what we're trying to do right now.
Yeah. That's an excellent point. I think some of the pious practices can help simplify things. For example, you're driving in your car. What are you listening to? Sports talk, radio, political talk, radio.
Talk. That'll relax you.
The one thing I notice about people that listen to that stuff, they're angry all the time. Angry, just come on. I mean, what about taking the opportunity to pray a rosary? Like, I don't really know the rosary, but I want to get more into it. So you put on a Catholic radio or USB or
YouTube,
stream on your phone, right? Bluetooth on your phone, and like listen to the rosary and pray along with it. Even if you don't finish the whole thing. I mean, it's better that and with your heart into it, rather than I remember Hail Mary, full of grace, Jesus, Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us, and you're rushing through it like a machine gun, and you just go just so I can say I did my rosary today, but your heart wasn't in it. You're just saying a bunch of words so you can get it done,
making noise.
You know what I mean? I mean and I think that when you talk about repetition from before, that's the problem. With repetitious prayers when they don't mean, because the Bible, for example, for his great love is without end, because he brought us out from the land of Egypt, for his great love was without end. He slew Pharaoh and all his armies, for his great love was, it repeats that over and over and over again. Well, actually, it's merciful love, Hesed. It's merciful love is without end. But it repeats it over and over again, but there's a point and a purpose to that.
Yeah.
It draws you deeper into salvation history. So I think you're right. We have to make a decision to simplify things and adopt pious practices that go along with your personality or however you want to pray. Like for people say, well, I want to read more of the Bible. Which version should I get? The version you go and read. Yeah. That's the version you should get.
Yeah.
Simple things like that.
I can remember on the pilgrimage when we were with Father Larry Richards and Sonia Corbett, we went to the Holy Land, and Father Larry, he has a very deliberate way of saying the Our Father.
Yeah, that's right.
And it is beautiful. And he says that you're not supposed to just, I can't remember what the Bible verse is, but he always quotes it before, and so everybody on the bus, because most of us do the Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And Father Larry, God bless him, because it really taught me so much about how to pray. Like not to just rattle off the words. And that's basically what he says. He goes, the Romans do that or something like that. That's what he said. The Romans do that. He was like, you shouldn't do that. So like every time, if you ever watch him, he has a stream mass, fast forward just to listen to how he says the Our Father. It is beautiful because it is deliberate, and he is like making sure that each word and each syllable is being focused on. And to me, that's very pious. I find that to be a very pious thing to do. And I'm so glad he taught it. There were 110 of us on the pilgrimage. And everybody finally, like by the end of it, you know what I mean? When we were saying the Our Father, everybody knew, slow it down. You know what I mean? Slow it down, take it in, focus on it. And it was a great gift. It was a great gift.
I recently had a similar epiphany to what you're describing he did, and I'm talking like 2 weeks ago. So there's this priest called Father Ian Van Heusen.
Yeah.
And he started...
He's with me.
Oh, yeah?
In Greenville. Yeah, he's up in North Carolina.
So he started this thing called Meta Catholic to
Yes, he
get
did.
into the whole virtual reality thing. And so they just released the Holy Rosary with the Sorrowful Mysteries as a pilot. They're going to try to fundraise getting it made for the whole Rosary, and then Stations of the Cross and all that kind of stuff. And I did the voiceover work for it, and so I was leading the whole Rosary for this VR virtual reality Rosary.
It's amazing.
But the thing is, when you're doing the Rosary for a voiceover recording, and that the experience people are having is like they are in the mystery of the Rosary in virtual reality, like they're seeing Jesus weeping in the garden and like all this intense stuff.
Yeah.
It's incumbent on me as the voiceover artist to really pray authentically these prayers and understand what it is I'm saying. And so when I was doing the Our Father, this thing happened to me as I was, doing one of the takes initially, as it is in heaven, give us this day our daily bread, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. I didn't read it like that, but But that line, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. When I got to that, I stopped. I was like, whoa, wait a second. This needs to feel very different.
Yeah.
And so if you check it out now, even if you don't have a virtual reality headset, you can go to it on YouTube.
And it's called Meta, what's it?
Meta Catholic, but it's on Father Ian's YouTube
It's
channel.
Father Ian, yeah, but Meta Catholic is the virtual reality thing. It's amazing.
So if you go to it now, the way that I landed on, and this came right away for me, it was forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us.
Amen.
You know, like really acknowledging the reality behind each of those words. And imagine if like we did that with all of our prayers, if we really like understood and processed word for word what we were saying. You know, even the bless us, O Lord, like if we were saying that prayer before a meal, like really think about each of those words so that they're coming from your heart, you know?
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. Because the heart in Hebrew, leb, is the place where your desire for God lives inside of you, right? Where you're the seat of the will, they call that. And that's where God can touch you, move your life. And that's where your prayer and your piety should come from. Yeah, from your heart. So that's awesome. I love that.
It's very, very important. Yeah. It just takes, and for me, you were talking about the Latin Mass earlier.
Yeah.
And do you have the red book where it's, the Latin and the English?
Yeah, the Missal.
Okay. Have you ever just read those prayers?
Mine's not red, mine's black.
But whatever.
Father Lasanne's Missal.
Yeah. I have his, But have you ever, the prayers in the Latin Mass make you weep.
Extraordinary.
Like the first time I ever read them, because I didn't know what was going on. First Latin Mass I went to last year, I was like, I have no idea what's going on. Nothing was normal, like nothing was anything I'd ever seen before. But I was like, well, maybe I'll read the red book. So I picked up the red book and I just started trying to figure out, because you could watch what the priest was doing and, and I started to follow along. And then I started reading the prayers. And I was like, how did this not stay in our Mass? And then I read the next prayer, and then the next prayer, and then the next prayer. And I was like, why did they think this was a good idea to take this away from us? Like, how did that become a good decision? And I wasn't being critical of Vatican II, because I honestly didn't know. It was my very first Latin Mass. So, like, I'm sitting there going, but I'm reading, and, like, the tears are just streaming down my face, and I'm reading the words, and I'm like, wow. And can you imagine if you were fluent in Latin, which all of them were, everybody in the world could speak Latin, and they're all praying these prayers while the priest is praying them for them. And I'm like, wow.
The same thing happened to Alina when we were driving to our first one. Alina's my wife.
Yeah. Did she read?
Well, we were in a car and she was reading through, we were lent the red book by the person who invited us before we bought our own missals. And like, she was reading through the priest's prayers, and she literally turns to me. She's like, "Nick, why did they remove this? Like, this is incredible. Even the Confiteor, there are lines in the Confiteor that are beautiful and they're profound, and it's like." It's so. Anyways, that's not what this episode's about. But
but I'm not going to say that that's what it's not about, because really it is, because it's about piety.
Yeah.
And we as Catholics are required to seek. What does Jesus say? Seek and you shall find, knock and it will be, you know what I mean? All of those things. So if you are aware of the traditional Latin Mass and you've never sought it, whose fault is that? Because the missal's out there, they'll give you a red book. The guy gave me up in Washington, D.C. was my first Latin Mass. I just had this call. I woke up in the morning. I was like, I'm just going to go. I have no idea. It was packed. It was standing room only. I'd never seen that many people in a church in my entire life. And I was like, whoa, this is intense. And there were a lot of little children, a lot of young people, and then there were older people. It was beautiful. It was all of America represented in one space. Every creed, every color, you know what I mean? It was just amazing. And we were all there together praying, and that's when I had no idea what was going on. But I read the book, but was it my fault? Because I didn't know it existed.
So that's not your fault.
Correct.
Yeah.
But when I found out it existed, then it became my responsibility to find out what it is. Because it was, how many years was it practiced in the church? How many years was there was it 1,200 years, 1,500 years?
There isn't a concrete number, but it organically
it's over 1,000 years.
Oh, yeah.
1,000 years. And we've had the new Mass for what, 60? I want to know what the 1,000 years are. I want to know what people were doing for 1,000 years.
I think what happened was, after Vatican II, like with the translation we got, right? So we got a dynamic equivalence translation instead of a formal equivalence translation.
Okay.
So formal equivalence is more like word for word translation. Dynamic equivalence is like paraphrasing, right? And so I think there was an oversimplification. So the idea was to kind of simplify things in the Mass, but I think what happened was an oversimplification.
Okay.
And so in 2000, when they retranslated the Mass and put back some of that original language, people reacted to that, but it was actually trying to return us to some of that beauty,
Right.
but still, you're right, the traditional Latin Mass or the Maronite or some of those Byzantine rites.
The Byzantine.
Whoa, the prayers,
Yeah,
what?
the Ukrainian Orthodox.
Yeah, Ukrainian,
It's
oh my
amazing.
goodness, it's just
The Greek. I mean, even the
amazing.
Greeks their Mass is pretty amazing.
Beautiful. Before they receive communion, I truly believe that what I'm about to say is truly Jesus Christ. Like, what? It's like beautiful Eucharistic
And they profess
theology.
it, like it's professed.
They say it or they sing it.
They sing it.
And that's what they say before they receive Jesus in the Eucharist. So I think there's definitely, we're trying to, in
Bring a little
2000,
more
to bring
piety
more
back.
piety and more formality in the language, the Lord be with you. I'm also with you, but now we're saying with your spirit, which is actually what it says in the Greek.
Correct, with your
Well,
spirit.
Paul said, and with your spirit.
And it's right and just.
And it works. It really does work. Like my kids back before, it wasn't a long time ago. We just got into the Latin Mass, but when we were, forever just attending the Novus Ordo Mass, like my kids were awful at Mass. They were just, it was always an ordeal. We haven't been to a single traditional Latin Mass that my kids have had an issue. They sit through an hour and 45-minute, 2-hour traditional Latin Mass.
Don't even move.
They love it. They're engaged. They're following along. They're in it. They love it. We just had a surprise on Palm Sunday. Oh, this is going to be a 3-hour liturgy.
Wow.
Literally just the blessing of the palms was the entire first hour. I kid you not.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
The
everybody
procession
was-
and all that first part of the
all
rite.
within that first hour.
And everybody was
Wow.
fine with it, weren't
Everybody was fine. My kids were super awesome. They were super engaged. I can't believe it. And literally the only difference is that it's not the Novus Ordo Mass. I don't know.
Wow.
Well,
Yeah.
and like you said, we're not judging one against the other because it's not fair to do so, really, because, according to what we believe, both are legitimate forms of the Mass.
Yes.
So we have to,
According
that
to
has
their nature, according to their nature, they are both
Yeah,
equally
Correct.
the
there's
Mass.
one Mass, two expressions of the one Mass.
Yes.
Ordinary and extraordinary form,
But
right?
the problem is that for Novus Ordo to be as pious and as beautiful and as transcendent as the Latin Mass, or the traditional Latin Mass, that it has to be done like with just as much reverence, piety.
And that's what
if you
my
watch Mass
priest
on
says.
EWTN, that I think is the
Oh, it's
Mass of
beautiful.
what Vatican II envisioned.
Correct.
When you see how the beauty and the piety, and they use English, but they also use Latin like you're supposed to. The wonderful balance
I
and
haven't
the
watched it in
beauty
years.
and the
It's totally changed. You should watch it. It's
yeah,
pretty
the
good
Mass
now.
on EWTN, the way
Pretty
that
good.
it's celebrated there,
It's reverent. It's very reverent.
It's very reverent. It's very that I think is envisioning what.
Interesting.
My priest at my church in Jacksonville, North Carolina, Infant of Prague, because we do not have a traditional Latin Mass within 2 hours of where we live. Eastern North Carolina is without Mass except for the last Sunday of every month in Wilmington, North Carolina. There is a Latin Mass on Sunday at 5 o'clock at night. That's our only Latin Mass, unless we drive up towards Raleigh. And if we go up towards Raleigh, which is an hour, now almost 2 hours, we have no Latin Mass. Father Van Heusen can do Latin Mass, but because of the document that came out, he can no longer practice the Latin Mass, even though he was allowed to learn to do it. So we're hoping, you know what I mean? And there are other priests in the diocese that can. That we have a military priest that also can do the Latin Mass, but they're not allowed to do the Latin Mass right now because it's been changed. So what Father Victor Gornis did at Infant in Prague is when he does the 10:30 Mass in the morning, full incense, he brought back all the patents. He does the Latin, we sing in Latin. He does all of it, and then he does the consecration facing the crucifix with his back to the, and it is standing room
Well,
only.
if you're facing the same way as the people.
He faces away from the people and faces.
No, faces the same way as the people. Because when you say it like that, people
Right.
who don't like that, they just turning their back on us. He's facing the same way as. But think about it like this:
he's representing
if you
the people.
fly in the plane, do you want the pilot looking at you when you fly in the plane? You know, that's you know?
That's so good.
That is like the best thing I've heard. No, you definitely do not want the pilot.
Yeah, so he's facing the same way as you are, leading you someplace.
He's leading you to heaven,
You're right,
basically.
exactly.
That's what he's doing.
Yeah.
He's leading you to heaven, which to me is just glorious. And so he does this beautiful mass probably there's only once every 5 weeks or so that he doesn't do it. But it's a reverent mass. And then all the altar boys, they all receive on the tongue, on their knees, which you just don't see that very often anymore. There's a few of the, what do you call them? The ministers.
Extraordinary ministers.
There's a few of those, and some do in the tongue and some don't on the tongue. And that's a big discussion for another topic, and we don't have to do that. But a lot of people say that has directly to do with piety, though, because it's reverence, because you're not supposed to. I mean, I was always raised that I don't touch Jesus. I'm to be given Jesus through the consecrated hands of the priest that created, that brought him to life. And that's why I have a very hard time ever putting him in my hands, but I will.
So I struggle with
sometimes.
I struggle with that reasoning. I've heard that before because it is Jesus.
Right.
And Jesus didn't want people to not touch him. And so I think of it more in terms of, in the context of liturgy, it is a way for us to embody piety. It's a way for us to, with our bodies, say, I am not worthy. It's like in the liturgy, in the Novus Ordo, we all say, Lord, I am not worthy to receive you, but only say the words. Shoot, I'm confusing it with the old language now.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm talking about. I'm not worthy that you should enter under my roof.
Yeah.
But only say the words, and my soul shall be healed. And so with our bodies, we're kind of expressing that sentiment in a sense, I am not worthy. But I wouldn't say as a generality that I like that notion that we shouldn't touch Jesus, because
Right.
I think
that's just-
liturgically,
And some people, they say, it's Jesus in the garden, he said, don't touch me, No, in the Greek it says, don't cling to me. It's two different things.
Interesting.
It's don't hold on to,
Like what he said to Mary Magdalene.
Yeah, because remember, and you think about, wait a minute, how's that? Remember when the second time Jesus showed up in the upper room when Thomas was there, touch my hands.
Yeah.
So he's telling people to touch him.
And then let the children come to me.
Right.
And, all that kind of stuff.
So it's not don't touch me, it's don't cling to me.
Yeah.
There's a difference there.
Yeah, don't try to possess me. Don't try to.
And just maybe to kind of tie it up, on the flip side of this, when you don't have those pious elements there, that's why it says in the Vatican Council, Sacrosanctum Concilium, the document on the Mass, on the liturgy, paragraph 22, subsection 3, no one, not even the priest, may add, remove, or change anything in the liturgy on their own authority. So why? Because all those things the priest, they all mean something. Mm-hmm. But when you have, I had an experience recently with a priest where I literally did not even want to be at Mass.
Wow.
And the only reason I was there, if I didn't have to be, I wouldn't have gone. I was preaching every day. That was part of the deal for the mission. But I'm like, where is he getting these words from? He's just making stuff up.
Really? During the
ad-libbing. No, well, he said he knew that he had to say the words correctly for the institution narrative, or else it wouldn't be a Eucharist there. But the rest of it, I'm like, why is he adding this and twisting this? And I'm like, it just really took away from the experience of the Mass, because the Mass doesn't belong to the priest. It's not his private property. He could do whatever he wants with it.
Yeah.
Correct.
It belongs to the church.
Not
and
pious.
Holy Mother Church is the one that decides what happens there. So it's just, so you have the traditional Latin Mass, but you guys are people on the other side, when you don't have those beautiful things in place, then you have priests that take liberties with it and really, take the experience of Christ away. Yeah, Christ is still there, but it takes the experience of engaging deeply into the mystery. It takes some of that.
No. There's a Mass that I've gone to a few times, and when we're in prayer, getting ready in the Mass, and then you'll say, hope that God will accept the sacrifice. You know what I mean? And the priest always says, thank you.
What? Oy.
He thanks us.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And I just, I just like sit there in the pew and I'm like, how, what? And he says it a couple of times during the Mass. He thanks the people for praying for him or whatever it is. I don't know. I just know it's not right.
No, it's not right. I always say, "Please, may Almighty God bless us."
Right.
You know, like, what are you there for then?
Yeah.
You know,
He says, thank you.
Instead of may Almighty God bless you, he's there in persona Christi, imparting the blessing of Christ. He's like, well, I'm no better than you. Just, you know, just bless us all.
And the weird thing about it, though, is his homilies are really good. Like, he has excellent homilies overall. I mean, like, you know, they're not, I don't know. They're honest. You know what I mean? And they're very much testimonial in a way sometimes too. So they're very good homilies and they do engage people. But then when we get into the actual liturgy, it's just like, what are we doing here? You know? That's why we had this conversation about piety, right? Because it's about reverence. And if you don't know the answer to a question, or you're curious about learning more about your faith and what it looked like from the beginning of the church, you know, there are a lot of resources you can go to, and we want you to have them so that you can seek reverence. You know, veiling is a beautiful option. Seeking out a Latin Mass, you might not be able to do it regularly, but even just exposing yourself to it, because, you know, it was over 1,000 years. It was our, you know, part of our heritage. So, and it still is valuable and viable in our Christian Catholic story.
And some people would argue that it is, at its core and the spirit behind the traditional Latin Mass, it is the Mass from the beginning.
Mass of the ages. Amen. So we're glad that you joined us for piety, simplicity, and a little bit of humility and a bunch of other stuff. So, and if you could, think about downloading the Awaken app. You can go to the awakenapp.io, and that will be great. And you can get all kinds of information. We have podcasts. There's a lot of podcasts on, actually, and prayers and music and a really cool messaging app. And if you could find it in your hearts to possibly sponsor us, we would really gratefully appreciate that. And Deacon's going to tell you how.
Yes, go to theprodigallife.com and you will see options there, different levels of how you can contribute monthly to the Prodigal Life. The different levels there, the different levels of angels. So be a good angel. Get your halo and support the Prodigal Life.
All right. Thank you, guys. God bless you.